if I'm going to actually change slide decks here and just give you a brief overview. I'll try to find it here on my desk. Got it. A brief overview of the resources that we have for planning your or completing your data management and sharing plan. So I know this isn't necessarily relevant to everyone if you're not NIH sponsored, but to many of us it is relevant. So, and maybe it's helpful for other similar requirements outside the US. Okay, so FaceBase is at the point where you're sharing the data, but there's also before that you have to manage your data internally. There's obviously a whole process that goes on from the time you plan your research to conducting it to getting ready for publication. So first of all, planning for your data management, why do you want to do that? Why do you want to put effort into that? Well, first of all, obviously, for those in the US and NIH sponsored work, we need to comply with the NIH data management and sharing requirements. But more importantly than that, the real heart of it is that we need to ensure that our data is reusable. So using standard formats, a good amount of metadata to describe things, using terms that other people can understand. When we use gene names or genotypes or strains or phenotype terms, et cetera. And then also as part of your data management, planning, you're thinking about understanding the budget and level of effort that's required to do that. And a big part of that is just your own internal data management. We think that the preparation of your data for sharing through FaceBase, or at least the mechanics of sharing it through FaceBase, aren't too difficult or time consuming that you would need to seriously budget for it. But it's really more about your overall internal effort for data management, which is a bit out of our scope, but we can at least provide you some thoughts from the perspective of preparing someday to share your data. So the elements of a data management and sharing plan, as provided by one of our colleagues in the NIDCR, is that just several categories here, but beginning with the data types, what type of data will be preserved and shared? Are there tools that are used in manipulating and analyzing the data, and will you be sharing those, or how will those be accessible? What types of standards in terms of the data formats and the way that you describe the data are you thinking about using in terms of the repository to be used? Will it provide persistent unique identifiers? How long will the data be preserved and available? What are the factors impacting the data access and distribution and reuse? And then just internally, your plans for compliance, how it will be monitored and managed, and by whom. So those are just some high level areas that you'll need to be thinking about. And then in terms of the DMS planning, writing the plan should really be thought of as just the last stage of a much bigger thought process. Everything on what types of descriptive information called metadata will I be using to describe my data, maybe learning about FaceBase, if that's the place where the data is going to end up, learn about what kind of terminology we use, also known as ontologies, estimating what size of data, how much data are you going to produce, and what formats, and what will you do internally to manage that so it doesn't get lost or mismanaged along the way. So a few considerations in general is when and how often do you plan to upload or share your data? So from a FaceBase perspective, we would encourage more frequency, not waiting until the very end and then having a big batch of data to do. That just introduces more room for error, more room for people with the knowledge of it to maybe not be around at one stage of an experiment to know where the data is at or how to describe it. Another major area to think about is how will you manage the data before it's uploaded? How will you organize it, keep track of it? Even thinking about, do you have space for it? A lot of times in our experience working with research teams in our own institute or in other areas of our overall university, is a lot of times people think a lot more about the kind of instruments that they're going to acquire and the kind of high resolution data they're going to produce, and not as much about where they're going to store it and how that's going to be managed. Obviously, thinking about security and backup policies. Clearly, a lot of these are things that other technical members of your organization are likely to be able to help with. And then what will you do to pre-process the data? And again, will there be tools that you should also be thinking about sharing? So in terms of FaceBase specifically, we have some documentation on our site, and Alejandro is going to also show this page, but one part of our documentation site, it describes the data types that we support, and there's a lot of flexibility in that. So if you're producing something that doesn't fall within our data types, just talk to us about it, and we're usually happy to get to better understand it and maybe expand to support it. The file formats that we recommend, the types of metadata that we like to see in a data set. So again, if you find you have something that you're not sure if it fits, just talk to us, and we're happy to try to accommodate. Always looking to accommodate new types of data, and as I said, our mandate is very broad, so we're always interested in new areas and new experimental types that we could support. Now, in terms of data planning, we have resources on our website that can support with some of what needs to go into a plan. But obviously, first of all, you need to understand or choose a data repository to determine if FaceBase is the right fit. But for any repository, what is the mission of it? What kind of data priorities do they have? And then consider those key issues that impact data sharing, like the data types, formats, et cetera. And then writing your management plan or your DMS plan, which will involve some questions that only you can answer, and then others where FaceBase could provide some general text that you can just use in that. All right, so just a quick word on data types. In our document on that, we talk about a more extensive list of the data types that we have supported so far in FaceBase. Again, we're always growing in these, but we really cover everything from sequencing data to imaging to gene expression, microscopy, a wide variety of experiment types and imaging modalities. So sometimes people only think of us as imaging, but we actually have sequencing and other types of data. So we have public health data that's like questionnaire survey type of information as well. We have human data as well as animal models, so we can handle controlled access data. And then again, it spans human and animal models. So, and if you don't see one on the list, we're often interested in it. For example, Chris mentioned that we have a data set of rat data that's coming in, and that was new to us. So we welcome that. And then in terms of data formats, the main thing to know is that we primarily favor standardized or de facto standard open formats, ones that have free and widely available tools. So for sequencing data, this is pretty easy because it's pretty well standardized. So there's not too much concern with that. With imaging, that can vary quite a bit more. We have pretty good coverage for microscopy formats through some third-party tools that do a good job of converting it. Imaging data also generally can either be converted and read and converted to open formats, but we can, if you have a format that you don't see on our list, then and you're wondering about it, you can reach out to us. But I think in terms of the planning stage, a good thing to think about is whether your imaging core or microscopy core can provide you with data that's in a more open format. Like they're probably using a particular vendor's instrument and maybe providing by default, just providing the data in that vendor's format. But you might be able to ask if they can provide it in an open format like DICOM or NIFTY, or for microscopy, there's a format called OME, standing for Open Microscopy Environment, OME-TIFF. And that standardizes a lot of the imaging header fields so that it can be openly read by some open source tools. And your core might be able to provide you data in a standard format. So, either DICOM, NIFTY, or OME-TIFF are probably going to be available and something they could provide you in. So that's just something to be thinking about. Am I going to get data in a proprietary format that's not reusable by anyone else, or can I get it in a format that others will be able to use outside my lab? Okay, so the rest of these slides, I'm just going to briefly show you, but I really will just direct you to the FaceBase website where a version of these slides are available, as well as some of the text that are referenced from these slides. So the purpose of this is really just to show you that this information is available on FaceBase. You can consult it when you're at that stage. It's really most useful to you when you're at that particular moment to go back and just know it's there, pull it up, and then use it as you're working on a DMS plan. But we go over here the types of metadata that we ask to be shared. We have a listing on the FaceBase site of all of the vocabulary terms, aka ontologies or terminology that are in FaceBase, and they fall in a variety of categories like anatomy, strain, gene, etc. And the full listing of these are all linked to on FaceBase, so you can see exactly what terms are available there. You don't have to use these in your day-to-day investigation, but it's good to know that how you might map your terminology into these. And occasionally there's a term that just doesn't exist in any standardized ontology because it's something that's either too narrowly focused for someone to have standardized out in the ontology space, and that's okay. We can accommodate those terms, we can help look for them, and we can also recommend them to the upstream vocabulary projects so that they can consider including it. And that's just what I just said right there, adding new ontologies. All right, so the website, again, has this information. I just want to show you a few tables that you'll find in this slide deck for your future reference. So as you go through a DMS plan, there are a variety of questions, so in the first column, and then there's our thoughts on what we can provide or not. So there's the contributor, that's you, the investigator. In this middle column, for example, for the types and amount of data to be generated, that's really something that only you can answer. So in the FaceBase, what FaceBase provides, we can't really help much there. But in the next one, types and amount of data to be shared, and the rationale for that. So you will still provide the bulk of the answer, but we do have boilerplate text snippets that you can use. And so on through this table, we can provide you just pointers to information. So about tools, and we can give you boilerplate about FaceBase tools for visualizing. And then here's like common data standards. So again, we have information on the site that you can use. You can construct an answer out of those text snippets, and so on through each of the questions. So with that, I just would encourage you, when you're at a point in your investigation where, or you're working on a proposal and you need to put your DMS plan together, you can come to the FaceBase site and get these resources, both a version of these slides as well as the online documentation to help you with filling out that plan. And with that, I'm going to turn things over now for Alejandro to do the live demonstration.